Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Mr. Issa, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I look forward to the reauthorization if we can get the reforms that were required as of our last couple of hearings on the use of those 168 slots. But let me go on to the actual data breach. Ms. Gaza, under your interpretation of a data breach, this is a data breach, right? It's a major incident and it's a data breach. Is that correct?
Under the definition of data breach, it is classified as a data breach.
Okay, so we've had a data breach. Let me turn it around for a moment, because both you and Mr. Gray said that you had no, and I think Mr. Runcie all said the same thing. You had no information that personally identifiable information had specifically been compromised. That's pretty paraphrasing all of you.
That's correct.
Okay, well, I'll go to IRS first. Ms. Gaza, you were there for the kickoff of the Affordable Care Act website, and as you know, in that website, if somebody looking at their information at the top of the screen simply went up there and changed the state, they might actually look at somebody's personally identifiable information. That was a vulnerability that was discovered right in there in the HTTP line, right? You remember that? That
was on the CMS side.
Right.
And so don't have any detailed specifics on that.
Just for historical sake, I actually did it. You could, and somebody did it themselves, you could simply change the state and you could end up with somebody else's identifiable information on your screen. Now, they would have said that there was no breach, as Mr. Gray is sort of saying, because there was no proof anyone took that information and used it. But let me ask it another way. If you put a team of white knight hackers onto this vulnerability, could you have harvested information in your estimation?
I think the evidence is that after the fact, yes, there were people that were accessing that application for bad reasons. Okay,
so Mr. Gray, I want to get you on the record under oath with an accountable statement. If there's evidence that people did nefariously gain some information, whether they used it or not, and that a team of white knight hackers or bad people could have harvested information, don't you have to admit that this is, by definition, a data breach, not just a hypothetical vulnerability, but a vulnerability that was recognized that caused the shutdown of this tool?
Thank you for the question and the request for clarification. I would say that when I am speaking about a data breach, I'm speaking about the Department of Education systems. And through our analysis, there was no department data that was compromised or viewed through this. This was a case of obtained information that was used to go through our system to pull information from the DRT.
Okay, but in this case, we're talking about you together represent like an automobile, and you're saying that your right-hand wheel didn't come off, but the left-hand wheel did or could have. Ultimately, the construction of the entire product was brought to a halt as a result of a failure, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And both of you, I just want to make sure, because I heard Ms. Gaza say it, but both of you admit that under FITARA, under the reforms, as CIOs, you have budget authority and the authority necessary to shut down or to make what changes are needed to control the security and accuracy of your work. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now my question to you in the short time remaining is, although this is about education and it's about the tremendous impact on students who will have a burdensome time applying, if we are to do the next level of reforms that this committee would be required to, if we've given each of you authority, and one of you says, I've got a breach, and the other says, I don't, how do we resolve within the hierarchy of the executive office of the president, so to speak, how do we resolve making sure that the failure of the whole is in fact controlled by somebody? In other words, I'm looking at the two of you. You gave slightly different testimony. I think you've come together on testimony. But I want to know how in the future we do two things. One, make sure that somebody above you, sort of a super CIO, can make sure that somebody's looking at the entire vehicle and not just a left tire and a right tire? And then, secondly, where were those white knights in this process? Where were the people who scrubbed this, third parties who scrubbed this data and system trying to find those vulnerabilities? Because somebody found it, and it wasn't either of your teams. Take an answer from either of you in the time I'm allowed.
I don't know where those white knights were, sir. I do know that there were other entities within the government, USDS specifically, that was assisting with this as well. So I don't know where they were.
Okay, so as Will said earlier, before the fact, you don't know. After the fact, of course, you could recreate it. Ms. Gaza, the two questions to you. You're very senior in this position. You've had a lot of experience. One, how do we bring together organizations like you that have become interdependent to make sure there's oversight of the entire combined authority? And two, how do we make sure there are white knights proactively in the future to try to find these things and maybe to concurrently and constantly try to find them?
Congressman, we actually do have processes in place where we do penetration testing, where we have individuals that come in and test our applications to ensure that they are not subject to white hat hackers coming in and getting away with the data.
Although white hackers I'm okay with.
White hackers, black hats.
Bad guys.
So we do have that process in place, and we do use it. I don't recall right now if that process was utilized on this application. It clearly should have, and perhaps we would have been able to avoid this. As far as your other question, as the IRS continues to work with other agencies to provide data, it becomes more and more important that we actually address the concern that you have raised. I don't have an answer for you right now, but it's something that we need to be very thoughtful about, because I think this is going to start happening more often.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Time has expired. In the prerogative of the chair, I think it would be helpful to this committee and to the Congress as a whole to get some sense of what kind of priority you put on testing your systems, because it's pretty obvious that something like this should have been tested and should have been aggressively tested anytime you're sharing data with another agency. So I hope the committee will follow up on that. Mr. Raskin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
And Madam Chair, thank you very much. Mr. Runcie, there's been a documented pattern of abuse with the student loan companies for many years now. Lots of scams have taken place. In 2012, the IG reported that a student loan company improperly accessed student borrower accounts to change the contact information of the borrowers in order to, quote, make it difficult for the borrowers to be contacted by their loan servicers. Why would they do that? What's the scam? Can you explain to us how that works for them?
Thank you. So they're commercial entities, and they're fee-for-service entities. So
these are legitimate businesses then? These are not internet scammers? Or
they're not internet scammers, but the nature of the interaction between, those entities and the students and borrowers, I can't characterize that. But they're businesses that are formed to provide commercial services, whether it's loan consolidation or something else. It seems and it appears that in cases where they want to have a level of control to create a transaction or to continue through the process, they change email addresses and potentially mailing addresses and so forth to facilitate the process that they're taking the students and borrowers through.
But how do they profit from it? They take over the student's account?
It's a fee. They may charge, and I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say they charge $100 per consolidation or more. So there's an agreement that they will consolidate the loans and create a lower payment amount or whatever the agreement is, and they would be paid for that.
So did this actually take place? I mean, in one example, the IG reported in 2013, a company charged borrowers a monthly fee, I think it was $60, in order to put their loans into forbearance with the promise of enrolling them in the public service loan forgiveness program eventually, which they weren't qualified for. But did that actually happen with people?
My understanding is that there are these companies that provide these services, and a part of that process sometimes is they put people in a forbearance with the understanding that they're ultimately going to go into consolidation. So those are third-party entities involved in a transaction that doesn't include the department, except for the fact that they're using the email addresses and the resources that we have to facilitate transactions where they make money.
So just to get you straight there, they're using your website essentially as the framework to access their victims, then they prey on the people, but as far as you know, they might still be in this scam relationship with the students. Yeah,
we've looked at IP addresses, and we've looked at some of the activity, and in some cases you will actually see loan consolidations, whether it's 10% or 100% of their clients, we don't know. What we've stressed is user education to make sure people are aware that they can get these services done for free by leveraging resources that the department provides.
Well, I get complaints on a daily basis pretty much from my constituents who feel like the whole system's a scam, but you're talking about a scam on top of a scam in a way. You're talking about people who are in serious debt from college, and then some of these kind of low-riding companies are able to access them, charge them more money to offer them either real or completely illusory services, right?
That's right.
Okay, who is the ombudsman and champion of America's students and college graduates who's looking out for the scams in the IRS, the Department of Education, at every level of government? Is there anybody?
Yeah, I think we play a role, the department plays a role. So, for instance, I mentioned user education. The IG has noticed that this is an issue, and we're doing some things with our systems to make sure that we give them an additional tool or lever that they can use to prosecute bad entities. So, we play a role in that. And
how many prosecutions have there been since this was revealed?
I don't have that information.
But have there been any prosecutions?
We don't prosecute. It would have to be through the IG or some other.
And let me just say, I know everybody up there is working hard for the American people and has a tough job, but the overall institutional sense that I get is one of basic passivity and reactivity to events rather than getting on top of it. We've got millions of people who are carrying these loans. I think there's more student debt in America than there's credit card debt now. It's more than $1 trillion. And obviously there's a lot of money being made there, including by people who are going out and preying on people who are already laboring under the burden of these loans. Do we need to create an ombudsperson, somebody who's just a champion of the students and the graduates to make sure that they're not getting ripped off at every step of the process?
Yeah, I mean, we have an ombudsman, but it's not a sort of a pervasive, all-inclusive person that sort of channels resources across government, across IGs, across operations. So that is potentially something that could be useful. But
where is that ombudsperson located? Is that
the ombudsman is located within FSA? They deal with complaints and issues that we can resolve. They're operational issues, the customer service issues. They could be school-related issues. But in terms of
did that person ever raise any of these issues with you about scams being perpetrated on students through the website?
No, those scams are done by third-party entities that are outside of our scope. And
so basically, it was nobody's responsibility to try to identify that threat. Is that right? I mean, that's not a gotcha question. I'm just trying to figure out, prevent this from happening again. Because, there were cases of this going back 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, again, the commercial entities that are marketing to students to provide services to those students, and the students agree to, obtain those services, and the questionable nature and value of those services is not something that we police. What we've been trying to do is provide user education and let people know that they don't need to use these resources. And we've working with partner organizations and so forth, but we don't have any control over those entities.
Thank you very much for your answers, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.